Why Biden himself doesn't pivot on this. He could easily reframe the question as to why aren't we talking about the California wildfires? I mean, he does talk about the bleach, and I think that was a really good point to try and nail that home. But I mean, we have a saying in Canada, the lower you get on the beaver, the softer the fur becomes. And
more of our panel as we've been doing this tonight. Stephen Bunnell's already with us, but Lance from We Are Serfs TV and Nick Oakes is with us, joining the conversation. Guys, thanks for being here, and I know you guys have been watching it as well. I guess we could pick up from there with you guys. Lance, we'll start with you. That discussion specifically about the issue of immigration, where, as I was saying, I think Trump did a good job of repeatedly pressing Biden on the issue of the cages. Who was the one who introduced cages? Who was the one? And Biden, because he would not respond to it, to me anyways, it came off as a pretty strong moment for Trump, and it seemed like a weak moment for Biden. How did you see it?
Yeah, can you guys hear me? Is this okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not entirely sure what kind of arc Donald Trump was going for here. It kind of seems like he was pulling the Mel Gibson. So he started out saying some pretty inflammatory things very loudly in that first debate. That didn't go over too well. And then he tried, I guess, behind the scenes in some private phone calls. He came off as being a little bit more maybe bombastic or anti-Semitic. And then it seemed by the time he had reached this third debate, they were ready to give him an Academy Award, but the format just didn't work for him. So that would probably be the best thing I could do in terms of an analogy on that situation.
Nick, how did you view that? I mean, to me, it appeared like, as I said, that we were seeing a pretty strong debate about immigration. Catch and release came up. Biden described it in one way. Trump described it in a totally different way. If you're not familiar with the border, I am. I grew up on the border and covered it for 10 years as a journalist. A lot of people, I think, across America don't really know what the situation is and walked away from that part of the conversation not sure what catch and release actually is.
He should have stressed that more. And I think Trump is making a mistake generally by not hitting the immigration issue like he did in 2016. It's noticeably more absent from the discussion coming from him because it's a strong issue for Trump. It's what his base loves and elected him for. And it's the whole thing with the kids in the cages. He's got strong talking points on it. It just doesn't get brought up enough. And of course, the same criticisms are always going to come. But I don't see it as working like it did. It's true that Obama did start the cage thing. And family separation it's an obvious question. What crime exists that doesn't involve a family getting separated when there's an arrest made, whether it's drunk driving or what? We have to have an enforceable border. And if people are going to bring kids along, which often don't belong to them, that's a huge problem. It needs to be addressed.
Let's jump over to the issue of that when we talk about a presidential election, it is a national election, but in fact, it's actually, 50 state elections is what's actually taking place, right? And so based on how the election breaks down, Stephen, that's really what we're talking about. And so every state has its own issues, obviously. The one thing that tonight, you and I talked about this during the actual debate, was this issue of fracking as it came up, right? And the debate over whether or not Joe Biden has ever said that he would ban fracking. He has said it many times. There's actually a number of them. I actually asked our producer while we were on, can you find that? Because there's a lot of those quotes out there, and they were able to just Google it and find it within a matter of seconds. Here it is. Biden has said it. That is so specific to one place. That is almost an issue for only one state, which is the state of Pennsylvania. That's the state that question was geared toward. Over the next week or 2 weeks, depending on how media in Pennsylvania play that clip, does Biden regret having said that? And does that clip, do you think, make the rounds through media in Pennsylvania saying he said that he didn't say it, he was emphatic that he didn't say it, here he is saying it multiple times during the primary?
I would have to go back and look. My understanding is the last time Biden said he considered banning fracking was like back in January. This was a long time ago. I know that Biden has said that he wants to phase it out, I think similarly to oil. But I mean, I don't think that's a very controversial point. I mean, we need to move towards some sort of zero carbon emissions in the future. We need to move towards green energy, whether we like it or not. It's just something that has to happen. It's a matter of national security and a matter of, making the living conditions for humanity sustainable into the future. So it's going to come come down, I guess, to how much people want to play a clip and play with the words and play with the semantics on whether or not you honestly think Biden is just going to end all of fracking immediately. I think any reasonable American doesn't believe that that's going to happen. It would be a disaster for not just this particular states that have fracking, but for America as a whole. I think that the idea to kind of phase out these sorts of dirty energies, compared to green energies, I don't think are that controversial, assuming they're done in a responsible way. And I'm pretty sure that most labor organizations right now support Biden's plans when it comes to phasing these energies out as well. So I don't think he's going to get as much hit for this as Trump seems to think he will.
Does it, Lance, it ultimately become a campaign ad that they target specifically, do you think, toward Pennsylvania over and over again? Biden says, I never said it, but he said it, and he said it multiple times. Is this that, I guess, coupled now with the other thing that came up tonight, which Trump really jumped on at the end there? You could almost see him salivate over the idea of, oh, you want to get rid of oil? And so he specifically brought up Texas, where right now, according to the polling, at least if you believe the polls, Texas is in play. It's more so in play than it's been in any national election in a very long time, or presidential election, I should say. And he mentioned Ohio as well. Youngstown, Ohio, obviously has a big oil industry there. So is that where that focus goes, is to trying to micro-target states, do you think, on those energy issue and job issues?
Well, I mean, if that was the case, I don't understand why Trump doesn't, why Biden himself doesn't pivot on this. He could easily reframe the question as to why aren't we talking about the California wildfires? I mean, he does talk about the bleach, and I think that was a really good point to try and nail that home. But I mean, we have a saying in Canada, the lower you get on the beaver, the softer the fur becomes. And I think that becomes a little bit prescient when it comes to something like this, because at the end of the day, you could easily spin this around on Donald Trump. You could push this towards him and say, well, you're saying that the trees are basically kindling, they light up really easily in fires and stuff like that. This is the kind of stuff that would resonate more, because the state is actually on fire. Like, that is something that's going to be more pertinent to people's everyday lives than, say, just talking about how, whether or not fracking will apply to them. Well,
and certainly, Nick, when we're talking about in those specific states, it applies to the livelihood of people working in those states. If we're talking again about fracking, as Stephen mentioned, I mean, there are people in those states, their livelihood is dependent on that. The oil issue, I could see you trying to make a play for that in Texas. I could see making the play for it in Ohio. But quite candidly, I mean, people who are big oil people in Texas, or even really supportive of the oil industry, aren't those probably Trump voters anyways? I mean, are you just, at that point, preaching to the choir?
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's in essence what Biden is trying to do. He's trying to reach a little bit across the aisle, right? I mean, otherwise he would probably try to take a stronger stance on fracking, I would assume. It's not a very popular, I would say, either campaign play or one that's even really resonating with Democrats as a whole.
Yeah. In general, guys, I guess, Nicola, let's talk about some of the other issues here. North Korea was an interesting one where they debated back and forth about Trump essentially saying, hey, if Hillary had been president, we would have been at war with North Korea. You guys couldn't do anything with North Korea. Biden couldn't remember Kim Jong-un's name. At least he seemed to stumble over it every time he tried to get to it and would just go around it. Was that at all? It was the only kind of foreign policy question we really had for the whole night. Was that a win for Trump? Or do you think the average person at home just doesn't care? North Korea is so far away. The idea of war with another country is just kind of in the back of people's minds. And it's almost white noise to people tonight.
I don't think people are worried about war with North Korea, and I don't really think they should be. This sort of idea that Trump is secretly sympathetic to North Korean communists is also ridiculous, and I don't think resonates with either side if they're being honest with themselves. As far as foreign policy, Trump ran on, what I would call an anti-war stance, at least compared to where we've been as a country in the last 10 years or so. And that's one of the reasons I voted for him. People like that. People don't want any more wars. They're more concerned with places like Iran, probably, and maybe Syria. But these are all places we don't want to be, North Korea included. And I think that should be stressed more. But it's not going to be a major thing going forward, North Korea. It just kind of came up.
And Nick, let me stick with you for a minute. So no one really wins or loses debates anymore, it doesn't seem like. I don't think that's really even a legitimate way of looking at a debate, who won, who lost. I guess the real question is, did anything happen tonight, do you think, that may have shifted voters one way or the other for either of these guys? Did they pull independents on either side, do you think?
Well, who are these undecided voters? How can they still exist? Whenever they have them on the major networks, they seem to be very decided. It comes out in retrospect. But apparently they're here. And, if they are, what's this election going to be decided on? it's not normal issues. It's not taxes or whatever. You've got Joe Biden out there talking about sex changing 8-year-olds. Like this is new territory. People care about where the country's going, where the culture's going, because it has really changed rapidly. And you want to boil it down to the big phrases of law and order. People, yes, he did. There was in his town hall a woman who had an 8-year-old transgender son or daughter, whatever it was. She asked what he thought, and he said that's great. We cannot discriminate against 8-year-olds who want a sex change.
So if that is what he said, that still is not the same as you saying that he just said that he wants 8-year-olds to have sex changes. Those are two radically different things.
Is it? I think that he came out pretty forcefully for it's okay to change your 8-year-old's sex. That's what she did. He supported it. She asked him directly, and people don't like that sort of thing. That's what I'm talking about. These are bigger issues than even healthcare, I think. But we'll see what pushes people either way. Yeah.
I think it's absolutely insane to say that people are watching news conferences on trans issues. As much as trans issues are important to me, I don't think that's going to be anywhere near the deciding factor in this election. I think this election is going to be a referendum, unfortunately, on how the economy is doing with the COVID. I'm sorry, say that again?
Go ahead, Stephen. Because we can only go one at a time, otherwise it all blurs together. Go ahead, Stephen, and then, and then Nick, you can respond.
There's like a 2-second delay, so if I ever speak over someone, it's just yeah. I mean, this election is just absolutely going to be a referendum on COVID-19. It's like the COVID-19 and more broadly the economy and how COVID-19 has affected the economy. I think that the average American is far more concerned about when they can go back to work rather than when an 8-year-old can or cannot, defend them being trans. I don't think the average American cares about these issues that much. Maybe if we were doing much better economically, or maybe if we didn't have, almost 250,000 people dead to a coronavirus that Trump continues to not take responsibility for. I just can't see people voting based on something Biden said about trans people. I have a hard time believing that.
But Nick, you seem to believe that it's social issues that then would be deciding this race. You don't think it's more in line with coronavirus, lockdowns, how long it goes on? Does Trump doesn't seem to want to pick a side of where he falls, like on the mask issue. He'll be like, oh yeah, I'm for it, but we shouldn't let it run our lives. He's not really staking out a very strong position. Is that a mistake?
He's playing politics with that, obviously, and you're right. He's not taking a definite side there, and because people are scared of corona. Now, Trump brought up the whole 99% of people who get it don't die, and it really is dangerous to people with other health conditions. That's the science. But generally, people don't react that well to that talking point that I just gave. Trump gave it, and then he's again like, it is something to worry about all this stuff. He's back and forth on it. People are back and forth on it, and that's why it's so hard to predict. People are worried about it. Republicans less so, certainly, but it's a tough issue for Trump, and I don't think he's really coming out on top of it, to be honest. He needs to stress the blue states are locked down with a higher rate of the virus despite those lockdowns than the red states where life continues more normally, that people do like to live as they have, and that's what he's got to focus on.
Just in regards to the coronavirus stuff, just real quick, that's just absolutely not true. You can draw an exact line 2 weeks after a lot of these red states started to reopen, and you can see the cases spiking up as they continue to disregard those lockdown measures. That's why you've had states like Florida going back and forth on whether or not they want to be locked down. It's just patently not true that the lockdowns haven't helped at least a little bit. Trump wants to point to New York and how horrible the state's doing because they've had tiny spikes in cases. New York was one of the most hit states in the world. It's one of the most hit regions in the world with the coronavirus, and they did a massive job in bringing that under control. And even if they have had a small climb in cases, they've done a really good job. The entire northeast region of the United States, a lot of those blue states have done a very good job at keeping that under control. A lot of the red states that opened earlier, Florida, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, all these states started to open up, started to see these massive spikes in cases. This idea that lockdowns do nothing or didn't help anybody is just complete and total delusional fantasy.
Not to mention other countries, right? You could look to the examples of other countries that did far better than the United States did across the board. And the reason for that there's a handful of contributing factors. But one of the big ones happened to be the fact that, yes, they effectively locked down and then supported their populace by giving them enough money to survive in that situation.
Oh, like Sweden with their no lockdowns and lowest numbers. Say the lockdowns are somewhat effective.
They didn't have the lowest numbers, especially of the Scandinavian
Sweden's
countries.
numbers were on par with the United States. Just as somebody that I was just in Sweden for a month ago, you can go look at their numbers. Their death toll is far higher than any other Scandinavian nation. That is just patently not true. Right. Their numbers were horrible compared to Norway, Finland, Switzerland, Denmark.
I can speak on behalf of Canada, or you can look towards other places like Vietnam, for example. New Zealand.
I'm sure that
there's another one.
Right. If the lockdowns are somewhat effective, you're still not stopping the virus. You're slowing it down, right? It's a virus. It's going to run its course. That's what these things do. Again, that's the scientists. I don't make this stuff up. I do default to what the scientists say. So the idea is that we're just going to suffocate ourselves economically for how long? Years? 2 years? 3 years? And then have the same net effect of the virus in the end. That's concerning to me, and that's concerning to other people too.
So the same net effect in the end is just patently not true.
this-
Again, if we look at countries that have been more locked down, like look at the Southeast Asian region, whether you're talking about Vietnam, whether you're talking about South Korea, like there are places that have locked down very responsibly. Look at New Zealand. There are places that have locked down that have done a really good job at controlling the spread of the virus. And though they've suffered some economic harm, they haven't had the same loss of life as us. And they've continued to support their citizens with the type of stimulus that America cannot pass because the legislation that has been passed months ago, and the House has died in the Senate floor because McConnell will not allow it to be heard, to be voted on. So, I mean, like this idea that we just can't do anything, and the fact that you bring up the scientists, no scientist is saying we should just let the virus burn through the country. I don't think any scientist has said anything like that at all. The idea is to wait until we either have a vaccine or until the cases are brought low enough that our hospitals aren't overflowing. We're sending people off to county hospitals to die.
So let me just
saying
jump
is we have to live in
because
a normal life.
real quick. Let me just bring this back for a second because we could have a whole debate show specifically about coronavirus. WHO just came out saying lockdowns around the world have doubled world poverty, right? So there's a whole lot of information out there that we could be debating. But going back to the election and specifically to this debate tonight, you had two candidates who were, the first question was about coronavirus and COVID and what do you do about it? And they both laid out plans, and neither of them is able, because obviously no one really knows, but neither of them is able to give clarity to how long will lockdowns continue, how will you deal with businesses. There was back and forth about some of this, but interestingly, again, I still want to make the point, the president focused on 3 states in particular. He focused on Pennsylvania, Michigan, and North Carolina as being states that have had strict lockdowns. And you can tell he was trying to appeal specifically, Lance, to the voters in those states who would be angry about lockdowns in order to try to say, hey, we're the answer to solving this. But I did not hear an exit strategy from COVID, for lack of a better term, from either of these candidates tonight.
And so, sorry, you're asking in relation to what exactly could they do at a state level, or should people as voters be excited about that?
As a presidential level, from a presidential level, they're both kind of talking about pie in the sky ideas to deal with it. The president says he's going to have a vaccine. He's not going to have a vaccine in a few weeks. That's just simply not true. But it won't matter because the election will be over by then. And then he can say, well, it took longer than we thought. It's not going to happen in a few weeks. But the bigger question is, if people are hanging this election, as Stephen said, on COVID, and how does this affect my life? How do you come out of this debate feeling about one candidate or the other? Do you feel that somebody has a better plan than anyone else?
Well, I mean, I can't speak. One of the two Americans on the panel could correct me on this. I don't think you have the power to do it on a federal level where you could actually implement a plan where everyone would have to either stay at home or something to that. I think you have to do it at a state level, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's arguable whether you have the power.
Can't be an executive order that locks down the country. But we're also even beyond that, aren't we, Stephen? I mean, we're beyond the point where I think the population would accept continuing this for another year. We're, 9 months, it feels like, into this process? And if Biden is elected and does become president, he doesn't take office until the end of January 2021. And now we're going to have mandates instituted and continued mask wearing. I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, it's been a long time and it sucks, but I mean, we have to do what we have to do. You've seen a lot of European countries try to reopen, and now you're seeing a lot of these European countries, I think in Spain and Italy and Germany and Sweden, who are starting to consider locking down more aggressively again as their cases start to spike. Nobody wants to be locked down. Democrats don't want the economy to be locked down any more or less than the Republicans want things to be locked down. But more importantly than being locked down, we don't want to hear news stories about teachers dying because kids go to school and they infect everybody, including teachers, who are some of our poorest paid people, but some of our most important people in society, dying to this coronavirus. I mean, if we're looking at lockdowns being a referendum, or this election being a referendum on lockdowns being effective, I mean, Pennsylvania right now is +5 for Biden. Michigan is +8 for Biden. North Carolina is almost 2 points for Biden. It doesn't seem like these states are massively opposed to Biden coming in and continuing the lockdown if that's what's needed to keep America and America's teachers and America's old people and even America's children safe.
Nick?
People are sick of the ritual. They know that when you walk into a restaurant, you got to keep your little face mask on. for 10 seconds till you get to the table, then you sit down and live your normal life, and you put it back on to go. It's a ritual. It doesn't do anything, and a lot of this
it's better than dying. I'd rather do a ritual than die. I gotta be honest. Between the two, I'd be like ritual, death. I mean,
is COVID nocturnal? There is some element of this that is over the top, and people realize it. Whether you believe in lockdowns or not, or taking appropriate measures, it's gone way over the top, and people are realizing that. There's nothing wrong with taking sensible measures to protect yourself from a virus. That's good. But it's gone to people just jogging with masks on, and some people are recognizing that this has become ridiculous.
Again, I think you have to look to other countries that have handled this and what they've done. And I think there's almost a universality to this. Like, I mean, science doesn't get to pick and choose between what is going to be effective or not effective. It's basically very hard line. The countries that have done well in this is because A, they have locked down, and B, they've helped their citizens out, right? I can turn towards countries like myself in Canada and even parts of Europe as well that have done systems where not only did they allow you to live at home, but they also supported you through that. Because if you don't, people, they have to pay their rent. If they don't pay their rent, they're going to be evicted. If they get evicted, they're going to get on the street and they'll spread COVID more. You have to help support your citizens while at the same time, yes, to reduce the numbers of infections, you have to lock things down.
But in the midst of what we're seeing right now, we haven't had another stimulus package since it expired July 31st. And if we don't have that through the election, it doesn't look like any deal is going to get done before the election. I mean, listen, set aside the Republican-Democrat thing. Is that not just an absolute, refusal to do your job? If you're a member of Congress, if you're an elected representative in this country, and you've left workers hanging the way that you have, if you have left small businesses hanging the way that you have for months, I mean, in my opinion, you should all be fired. You should all be out of a job when you can't get together, whether it's politics, whether it's just disagreements on small things. There are so many people hurting as a result of the failure to act here, Stephen, by both Republicans and Democrats who are in Washington right now. They're all acting impotent, and nobody seems to want to move anything forward. And we can cast blame in lots of places. The bottom line is your one job is to represent the people, and it does not feel like that's being done.
That's absolutely not true. We have a bicameral legislature in the United States divided in two parts. We have the House of Representatives and we have the Senate. The House has put a bill up to the Senate, and McConnell will not hear it. I disagree that there are a lot of places to lay blame at for us not having stimulus. There is one place to lay blame, and it is in the Republican-controlled Senate. If you want to know why there isn't any stimulus passed, that is a great question to ask. The question needs to be directed at the Senate Republican leader, Mitch McConnell.
Nick, is
also,
that true?
Who's
Because
getting
the way I
stimulated
see
in these bills? Sorry, one of my questions is who's getting stimulated in these bills? Because it seems to be like there was a one-time payment to Americans for $1,200, $1,500, but the majority of them have been repeatedly they're going to be large donations to not donations, but large subsidies given to corporations, stuff of this nature. But are the individual Americans actually getting any kind of additional payment?
Right, and so far they haven't. The majority of the money has gone to big corporations and airlines. Go ahead, Nick.
Right. No, the people are recognizing that. The Democrats have been worse than the Republicans, in my opinion. The Republicans haven't been great at all. There's truth to that, of course. And you're right. There's been a massive transfer of wealth to these giant corporations. Well, every mom and pop in the country is shut down. I don't know how many businesses I know about that have just failed. I live in the most locked down state in America. I'm here in Hawaii. And let me tell you, it is a really bad situation. I'm seeing people's lifelong work and dreams just crumble every day. Every day is something new. Somebody else is suffering. And that's a huge problem. They absolutely feel that no one's in government has their back, which is pretty true. It's also the bluest state in America, and that's made things a lot worse. There are red states where the restrictions are not nearly so stringent, and people are able to live.
The comment that Stephen made a comment earlier, Nick, that I just wanted you to weigh in on too. He mentioned that Democrats don't want lockdowns any more than Republicans do. But I think if you look at states, whether they want them or not, those lockdowns certainly seem more strict in those blue states than in the red states. You're in a blue state right now, you said.
Democrats do want lockdowns more than Republicans do. They're more worried about COVID than Republicans are on average. You can just talk to them and tell this. You don't need a study for it. And a lot of people who are financially comfortable or taking care of unemployment, whichever it may be, are a lot more able to sit out this lockdown than people who own a business or have a job that they have to depend on still, who are really suffering. And it's that portion of the population is unfortunately willing to watch the other portion of the population absolutely suffer and wither on the vine in front of them because they're a little bit nervous about COVID. And we have to have a balance here. I understand these are scary times. I get it, but there's other things out there that are destroying lives than this disease.
I wholly push back on this. Politicians are failing us. If you think it's both sides, why was Pelosi able to throw a $2 trillion stimulus to the Republican Senate and McConnell responded saying $500 billion is the highest I'm willing to go? Even Trump didn't agree with McConnell on this stimulus. I don't know how you can possibly blame both sides for this when McConnell and the Senate Republicans are clearly holding the country hostage and refusing to pass a stimulus that we need to survive these lockdowns until Trump's own vaccine is delivered to us sometime early next year.
I know money
the
is
argument
just pretend
is
now.
Go ahead.
The worst is yet to come financially, right? We are just sinking into this hole where, I look at the graphs and the working class is just dipping so far below the standard of living that went down in 2008 and all these other crises. It's not even close. Like, we're in a really bad spot and it's getting worse. And I'm sorry, but the deficit is real. We act like money is just this thing we can throw, but we don't have it. And at the same time, we're talking about, we're going to have health care for all, and we're going to have health care for illegal immigrants too. And this is all fantasy. We have to look at some real solutions here. And yet, the government is the one keeping me from going to work. I feel that the government does owe me some money for that, but we don't have a lot of good answers here. And I don't blame Mitch McConnell for being a little bit cautious with the money.
This is absolutely not true. The austerity measures are not supported by anybody, but we say the deficit is real. What does that mean? The Federal Reserve has the job of watching unemployment and inflation. And you can look at the CPI, you can look at the PPP, you can look at the inflation of the USD versus any other currency. The idea that we're inflating our currency or the idea that printing too much money is hurting us right now is patently not true. I don't understand how you could think about talking to a working class American that is out of a job or doesn't have a place to work because they're shutting down and say, well, hold on, there's a big clock outside the Federal Reserve that's it's ticking a little bit too high, so we can't actually give you the money that you need to buy food for your family. That is insane to me. If we need to print a little bit of money to get out of this, we don't have any of the ill effects that people keep saying we're supposed to suffer right now. I don't know why we wouldn't go ahead and do it.
Oh, we are going to do it. That's what's going to happen. I think it's going to make things harder down the road, but I have to agree with you somewhat. What choice do we have? That's why I said there's no good answers. It's Trump wants to spend the money. He wants to spend a lot of money, and it's good for his reelection. It might be good for the country. It's certainly good for us right now. And we need it right now. But where this is going worries me.
I'm just out of curiosity. Would you say that then work is freedom?
Work is freedom. I prefer to work. I feel pretty free.
Was there more to that question?
No, that was all.
Okay.
So, big picture, overall, we have 2 weeks until the election. About 47 million Americans have already voted so far in early voting. And as we move toward Election Day over the next 2 weeks, what do you think is going to happen that could either move the needle for either of these guys in the direction? Or do you think at this point, and one of you said, and I apologize, I forget who said it, it might have been you, Nick, who said that the idea that there are a lot of people with their minds not made up, you don't believe, that you think pretty much everyone knows where they're going. Is anything going to change that in the next 2 weeks? We can start with Nick and we'll go around.
Well, there's another round of riots, there's another police shooting or something that really, sets people off. That's going to move the needle a bit. The COVID thing is so settled in. People are either scared or wanting to get back to regular life. I think people have made up their minds on that issue. No, I think what's set is set. I think that the early voting numbers are looking positive toward Trump, but this is 2020, and I will predict nothing.
Real quick, why do you think they're positive towards Trump?
Just from what I've seen, there's been some good indications from states like Michigan and Texas that the Democrats are supposed to be so far ahead in the early write-in voting because they're the ones not going to the polls to avoid COVID and whatnot. And it's not quite what they expected, but we'll see if I'm correct on that as Election Day rolls around.
And that's based on exit polling? Is that what you're saying? What's that based on?
Yes. Yeah, exit polling.
Lance, obviously, you, as you said, you're not here in the. Are you in Canada? Is that where you are right now?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a foreign dignitary.
So looking at this from north of the border, as you see what's going on here, I mean, how are Canadians, real quick, responding to it and kind of viewing the election in terms of what happens between the U.S. and Canada over the next 4 years? How are they viewing it?
I think right now, the overwhelming sentiment in Canada, I think, is close to 80 to 85% is polling that they do not want Trump to win. I think for pretty self-evident reasons. Obviously, we're terrified. We're terrified for all of our brothers and sisters to the south who are undergoing what seems to be some kind of strange social experiment. It feels like a petri dish sometimes in the fact that, like, I don't understand how Donald Trump has been getting away with just trying to do some weird herd mentality. Let's, not give every single American a living wage while they may or may not get evicted in the short term. I personally do want to see something done immediately in order to help ameliorate the conditions for just average working Americans. That would be what I would hope to see.
All right, Stephen, what do you see happening over the next 2 weeks, especially with early voting underway right now?
Yeah, I mean, if the polling continues to hold up, if the voting continues to go the way that it does, it's possible that the Democrats walk away with the executive branch and both halves of Congress. But it's also possible that somehow there is a roadmap where Trump wins and the Republicans hold on to the Senate. So who knows? I think everybody is very scared after the last election cycle, to the 2016 one rather, to make any strong predictions. I feel pretty confident right now that Biden and the Democrats are going to walk away with this, but we'll see what happens.
I've heard you say in the past, Stephen, if you believe this idea that the polling's not right. The polling was pretty wrong in 2016. Do you think the polling is correct this time around? And if so, why?
I think the polling was very close to being dead on in 2016. I think the polling was very good in 2018, and I think the polling has been very good now. I think people mix up polls and projections. I think a lot of the projections were a tad off in 2016. Famously, I think it was either the New York Times or the Washington. No, it might have been the Huffington Post of the 99% projection for Hillary to win. The polling itself was pretty close in most places. There were a couple of big blunders. I remember Michigan was a big blunder between Hillary and Bernie. But for the most part, I think most of the polling is pretty dead on. The margins this time are far wider for Biden than they were last election cycle for Hillary. A lot of people think that that last election cycle, Trump blew it out of the water. But I mean, 80,000 votes in different areas could have swung that election massively for Hillary. So, I mean, I think the polls for the most part get the job done pretty well. We saw it through the primary season. The polls got the job done pretty well. They lined up pretty well with how the voting turned out. And I guess we'll see this election cycle, whether or not the polls continue to be about as right as I think they have been.
Yeah, let me ask you one more, and then I'll go back to Nick. 'Cause obviously, you guys each have your own view. Clearly, Stephen, you're in the Biden camp in terms of who you would prefer to see as president. But setting Trump aside, so not he'd be better than, do you believe that Joe Biden will be a good president if he's elected?
Joe Biden offers one of the most progressive platforms that have ever been seen in American history. I'm really excited for Joe Biden's position on healthcare. I think moving us further to the left on healthcare I think that we are embarrassingly behind the rest of the world there. We should be debating whether or not we should be single payer or multi-payer, not whether or not we should even have a public option. So I'm excited to see us move to the left on healthcare. I'm excited to see us expand benefits to families, whether that means maternity or even paternity leave or some type of guaranteed sick leave. I'm excited to see potentially boosting the minimum wage or strengths for labor unions. There's a whole bunch of policies, domestic and foreign, that I'm really excited to see under Joe Biden. So, yeah, I mean, I think that all in all, I'm excited for a Biden presidency, not just because it's a rejection of all the insanity of Trump, but hopefully it sets us back on the path of bringing America more in line, at least economically, with other European countries that we should be comparable to.
And Nick, I'd ask you the same question. Not so much better than Biden, but if Trump gets another 4 years in office, why do you think that would be good? Do you believe he will be a good president for those 4 years, and why?
Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to the next 4 years with Trump. I mean, why do so many right-wing people hate Obama so much? Not because of his first term, because of his second. That's when presidents get things done. And I think that Trump has not gotten everything done that I would have liked him to so far. But I really do hold out hope that once he's reelected, it's going to be Trump unleashed, and he's going to really come through. He's going to free up the internet for free speech again. We're going to really see that wall come together, and I think it's going to be just a fantastic next 4 years.
Well, Nick, Lance, Stephen, guys, thanks so much for hanging out tonight and doing this debate with us. By the way, our producers are letting me know that looking at the way that Twitter seems to be coming down tonight, both sides, Biden's camp, Trump's camp, think that they won the debate. Huge surprise there. Very shocking stuff. Breaking news. The candidates think they won. Look, the bottom line is set the campaigns aside, set the pollsters aside and the pundits aside, because they all believe that they know. But ultimately, it comes down to you, the American voter. You're the one who actually gets to decide, and you'll do that officially less than 2 weeks from now, when the official election happens. Election Day, November 3rd, on its way, and a short time from now. We'll continue to follow it, of course, and we'll be with you through that whole process. But for tonight, that is our coverage. Thanks for being with us. Again, I'm Ben Swan. Glad that you were with us for our debate coverage through RT, and we will see you again very soon. Have a great night.
Hey, we want to mutual aid you to get some eyeballs on your work. So if you have a leftist YouTube channel or Twitch stream or something you want us to advertise, just send us a 20 to 30 second ad using the forums at weareserfs.com. We'll do our best to help you out. And please submit once per channel.
To our God, I'm Wrath. We pray at your altar of greatness. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, you are the light that guides our path. To our lords, Jimothy K. Meeblebeeps Jr., Ryan Lubin, Trevor R., Jeffrey Lamb, Poppy Nelson, Stephen, Hans Josephine, Nine Tails Cosmic Fox, we bow meekly for your pleasure. To our Knights of the Round Table, J. Fraser Cartwright, Thomas Brereton, Ali Menthal, Jimmy Bignuts, Good Poon Hates Cops, That's Solid Poon Then, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chiringoito, Goofus Lankius, Zach Christensen, Nicholas Marks, Yoppie, Josh Mickelson, Dr. Zayas, Dylan Byth, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We salute you.